So Melodyne 5 is out and it's amazing. Why? In today's video, I'm going to give you my top 5 reasons. Hi folks, I'm Mike and I hope you're well. Now I was definitely one of those people in the past that was anti-pitch correction on vocals, and I think that's because in the early days of this technology it was given a really bad name with a lot of overuse on some pretty big hits. Now as I started to use Melodyne 4, I really began to appreciate that you could use it to tidy up a vocal performance without sucking the humanity out of the performance at all. And I was really interested to see what they would have in store with Melodyne 5. So I've been giving it a test run and I have to say I've absolutely been blown away by the improvements. They've had some really innovative ideas in this one and I think it's really worth you checking it out. So I'm going to be going through my top 5 reasons why I think it's an awesome upgrade in this video. Now if this is your first time here and you like this kind of content, all about home recording, DAWs, gear reviews, plugin reviews, that kind of thing, then please do subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you get notified about my future videos. Now let's get stuck into Melodyne 5. So if you think Melodyne is only about melody and vocals, then you're going to be pleasantly surprised by the way it handles chords and instruments. So what I have loaded up on the screen here is an electric guitar part which I recorded last night, and I've applied Melodyne, and you can see right away that it's actually picked out the individual notes in the chords here, and if I play it you'll be able to see that in context. Now before I go into how I can manipulate that, I want to chat just for a moment about how it detects chords. Now you can see that it's picked up the key here, the C minor key, when it's analysed the guitar, but it can also pick out the chords which are being played, and that's more than just a labelling feature. We're going to make use of those chords a little bit later on. But I also want to mention that some DAWs do have chord detection, have chord tracks, and if they meet the right standards, then Melodyne can actually make use of those as well. So when you use this, you may already see some chords appear there. But if you don't have a DAW that does that, then Melodyne can do it for you. So right at the top of the window here, we can see an area where the chords are going to be displayed. There's nothing there at the moment, so I'll right click and I'll click on Analyze Chords, and you can see right away it's picked up some chord names there. Now I've been using this for about the last week or so, and I have to say it does a very, very good job. A lot of the time it just gets the chords correctly, even when they're more complex chords. However, once in a while it does get it a little wrong, and I can see here that it's made a mistake. Instead of that being a G minor, which I know it is there because sorry, G major, because I play the guitar part, it's picked it up as an E minor. Now I can manually change that. I can just double click on that and change it to a G. Now, those of you who know a little bit about music theory know that there's not a big surprise there because G and E minor are very related to each other. And it is helpful that I've corrected that because we're going to make use of these chords a little bit later. Now, before we get into that, let's look at see how we can manipulate the notes. Now, I was a bit tricky here because when I recorded this guitar part, I actually on purpose made one of the strings on the guitar a little bit flat, a little bit out of tune, just a tiny bit flat. And if you have really good hearing, then you will be able to hear that. Let's give you another chance. You hear it mostly in those top notes there. Well, we can really easily fix that just by double clicking on that note there. So I'll just double click on it, and you can see it just snaps up a little bit to the center of the note that it's on. Okay, it's a small adjustment, but it can make a difference to it there and there. And now those notes are in tune. In addition to that, we could simply select all of the notes there and double click on them. And you can see there's adjustments made to all of those notes there. So all of the strings of the guitar have been put in tune. Let's have a listen. Okay, now this is something I'd do with a little bit of caution. I wouldn't do it on a whole kind of track normally like that. It wouldn't be worth it because you do run the risk of getting some artifacts and things. But if you just want to do it on individual notes like I did at the beginning, I think it's a very cool thing to be able to do when you've realized a week after recording the guitar that one string is slightly out of tune. Okay, so how else can we manipulate these notes? Well, we can change the notes to different pitches, of course, if we want, and there's some snapping available. Now, at the moment, you can see that some of the grid here has a white background. these represent the notes which are actually in the key of C minor. However, we might want to make sure that we're only using notes which are actually in those chords. So we can change our snapping here. I'll just open this up. I'll change it to chord here, and then I'll just double check to make sure that the actual snapping is on chord snap. Okay, so now what we see is the white backgrounds represent the notes of the chord that's being marked up the top there. So now if I drag this note, it's just going to snap to one of the notes which is already in the chord, which is great. So let's have a listen to that. And that's cool, but I might not always want to do that. I may want to use some notes which are still in tune, but not necessarily in the chord, in which case I could change my snapping to chord scale. Okay, so this time we have a sort of notes in the background in white, grid squares in the background in white. I'm sure there's a better way of saying that. Anyway, and those are the safe spaces within that chord where we can move our notes. They're not in the chord, but they're sympathetic to that chord. So let's see if we drag this one up here. Okay, let's have a listen. Okay, interesting. Let's drag these two up here and that one up there. And now we've got something really cool going on. Probably a little bit out of tune, that one. There we go. Beautiful. So it's really handy. We can actually change the composition somewhat after we've even recorded the guitar and we're dealing with chords. Very cool indeed. Okay, so we detected the chords using the guitar, which was already there. But what if we had another instrument here, which of course I've got prepared, and I'll pull it up here, and this is an organ. Now what I've tried to do is replicate a scenario here where you may have got a short sample which you've looped throughout the song. In this case, there's this organ which sounds like this. Now it's not following the chord progression, as we can see. If we blend it in with the guitar, it doesn't sound too bad. But, you know, not quite right. So what we can do here is make sure that this does actually fit the chord progression. So I've selected all the notes there with Control A. I'm just going to double check that I've got this set up correctly. So we're going to change this to chord, and then we're going to change it to chord snap. Okay, so I've got everything selected. I've got the snapping on for chords, and I'll double click. And you can see that lots of the notes have shifted around. And what they've done is they've tried to fit in as close as possible to the chords which are denoted at the top here. So let's have a listen to the organ by itself. Cool, that's going to fit in nicely with the guitar, but I can still, of course, adapt it. So I could just change these bass notes down here. Let's have a listen. Okay, let's put it in with the guitar. So it's conceivable that if you've got a loop or a sample and you've got it from somewhere and it's not even playing the correct notes or the correct chords, you can still go ahead and adapt it. Very powerful indeed. Let's just have a quick last listen to the whole thing in context with some other instruments.
4.
So I'm using a bit of artistic license here when I call this next one a feature, because it's not really a new feature, which is something different you can do, but it is very important indeed, and they've changed it for this version of Melodyne. And I'm talking about the algorithm, the way in which they detect whether notes are actually out of tune or not. And they say that what they've realized is that when human beings are actually listening to someone singing, they're not listening to the whole of a word as such, or every single phrase, and listening to every single part to see if it's in tune. There's a key part of a main part of a note, which is where we determine whether it's out of tune or not. In fact, there's lots of variations going on with some natural singing which make it sound very, very human. Let's have a look at this vocal that we've got here. I'll quickly play it.
Only yesterday, honey.
Now you can see with this little line that runs all the way up here where the pitch is. And say, for example, on this note here, you can see right in the middle here, it's roughly in the middle. That's the part where we're probably really listening to when we are listening to a note and determining whether it's in tune or not. And it's really handy. What we can do is just double click on notes like this, and it'll just pop them to the center of that note there to make sure it's in tune. So if you did want to individually tune notes, you can quickly do it like that. If we have a listen now.
Only yesterday, honey.
Now, I'm still not a big fan of grabbing all of the notes and retuning them. I like to just, use my ears and retune the notes which really strike me as out of tune. But if you wish to do it like this, you can. So as we can see, there's a lot of variation actually going in there. For example, she's singing and she's going to slide from one note to another. So technically this part in the middle is out of tune. And then sometimes at the beginning of a note like this one, you'll have a part which is a little bit sharp or maybe flat, but often it's sharp as we attack the note. Probably we don't really notice it when we're listening to it. You can still adjust some of those things. I can, for example, grab the curve there and just move it around and make some adjustments there just to make that a little bit more perfect. We've got to be careful with being too perfect, right? But we can adjust it nonetheless. You need to use your own ears to determine whether it still sounds natural or not. I'll let you judge.
Only yesterday.
So that's really what they've done, which is very key in this particular release. And I can definitely hear a difference. I'm not hearing so much roboticness. Is roboticness a word? Let me know in the comments down below. But it's definitely improved in this version.
3.
So the next one is something that I know I'll be making use of in the future because I'm a big advocate for doing some manual editing of the levels of your vocals before you put them through your compressor and before you use automation. And often that means chopping the vocals up and using clip gain to adjust the level of parts of the vocal which really poke out as too loud or are just too quiet. Well, there's some new tools in Melodyne which really do help out with that, and it's going to be a real big time saver. They're called the leveling tools. Let's just see them in action. So we've got this little bit of a vocal here. Let's have a listen.
Only yesterday, honey.
And I'll particularly draw your attention to this note here, which is a reasonable amount louder than some of the others, and this one here, which is quite a lot quieter. So let's just grab all of the notes in that section there. Of course, I could grab all of the notes in the whole vocal, and then I'm going to bring up the leveling tools. And you can see here that we've just got two controls: make quiet notes louder, make loud notes quieter. So as I drag this slider up, let's have a look at this quiet note here. Okay, and you can see that it's made that note louder without adjusting all of the other notes, and then make loud notes quieter. So look out for this one here, and you can see as I drag it down, it brings it down into the realms of the other notes. So look, you don't have to use them to the extremes, but look, that looks pretty good to me there. So I'll just click on OK and have a listen.
Only yesterday, honey.
So that can really be a big time saver when you're just trying to get everything in the right ballpark before you actually do go ahead and use compression. I will say, especially with automation, you definitely still want to be using that on vocals in your mix because your the volume of your vocals needs to change within the different passages of a song.
2.
So this next one for me is a real game changer, and I've been like a kid with a new toy as I've been playing around with this since I got Melodyne 5. Now I've been hiding something from you up until now on this interface, and I'm going to reveal it. So I'll go up to the options here and I'm going to click on show sibilance, and you can see here that the display has changed a little bit. Some of the areas of these so-called blobs in Melodyne have changed with those lines being drawn into them. Those are the sibilants, so it sounds like the s and the ps and the ch sounds of our voice. But also in this context, we're also talking about the breath, and you can see a breath just there. It identifies those for us and it starts to treat them a little bit different. And the reason for that is because as humans, we can pitch the note, the sound of the voice which is making the note, but we can't actually pitch the sibilants. We can't actually change the pitch of that ourselves when we sing. However, previously in this kind of software, when we've been altering the pitch or tidying up the pitch pitch of some singing, we've also been changing the pitch of those sibilants, and that's probably added to it sounding a little bit unnatural. So what happens now is, if we were to take a note like this and I was just to tidy it up like that, it's moved that note to the correct position, but it hasn't changed the pitch of the sibilants. Although that did change visually, that's just a visual thing. It's treated it differently. Even if we drag it up to a completely different note, although it has moved up there with it, it hasn't actually changed the pitch of it, so that it's still at the same pitch. So all of these things add to making sure that it keeps natural. Now what's really cool about this as well is we can actually change the volume of that individually. Ping, light bulb moment. You know, all of us who have used DSs in the past are now thinking, this could be really, really handy. So we can actually look at that sibilance there, and I'll bring up this tool here, which is the sibilance balance tool. Now look what happens now when I drag up and down. You can see that the note here has got much quieter, but the sibilants sound the same. I can do it the other way. It restores the note to the original value, and I'll bring that S down. Let's bring it all the way down to the bottom. Now it's going to sound really silly. Have a listen.
Only yesterday.
I just like doing that for fun. But anyway, I wouldn't do that under normal circumstances. So let's bring it up to a normal value.
Only yesterday.
So you could grab all of the notes in this particular passage, and then you could adjust all of the sibilants all together, quite potentially replacing using a de-esser. I think it's probably going to be more efficient because we're not working with particular ranges of frequencies and then reducing them like we do with the de-esser, but it's identify those parts of the vocal which don't contain a note, and it's enabling us to adjust them individually. Really, really, really cool. I think even the leveling of it is very, very cool for breaths as well. If we have a listen here,
Honey,
you can hear that breath from Susie there. So let's just grab that and make it a little less obvious.
honey, I was the
Now, you could get rid of it completely. I could even hit the delete key on the keyboard and get rid of it. Let's have a listen.
honey, I was the
And look, sometimes that could be very cool if you want to keep, something very, very tight sounding, but I would probably most of the time leave it in there. It's not bad to hear breaths. It's sometimes they can be a little over accentuated. This is a great tool for adjusting that.
1.
So as well as changing pitch in Melodyne, we can also change timing as well. And with timing, they've also taken this sibilance into consideration in a really clever way. So let's take a look at this same passage again. And what I'm going to do is drag out the end of this note here to make it a little bit longer. And it's going to make this note shorter. So I'll just grab that and drag it out because I want to extend that note. But look at what's happening to the sibilance. That S there is staying the same length, okay? It isn't touching the actual duration of that S sound. And that's because as humans, of course, we can intentionally extend an S, but normally we kind of leave it around about the same length. So it isn't stretching that out. That would sound really odd. So that's very, very cool indeed that it does take that into account. But on the other hand, when it's dealing with breaths, it handles it a little bit differently. If we look at this section up here where we've got our breath,
honey, I
if we were to change the beginning of this note here and make it earlier, look what happens. The breath does indeed change length. It gets shorter. And that's because a singer would do that. If they didn't have as much time to get a breath in, they would take a shorter breath. So it's not leaving the breath the same length, regardless of where we put it. So let's have a listen.
honey, I was there with
Not that Susie would ever sing that part like that, but you get the point. So really, really clever considerations there, in my opinion, really adding to the whole natural nature of these adjustments that we make. So Melodyne 5 comes in a number of different packages at different prices. So check the link in the description down below to find out what they are and what you get in each package. You can also check upgrade options there as well. Now I have to say, even the cheapest of those packages contains a number of the features that we've discussed in today's video. Now if you've got any questions at all, please do ask in the comments down below, and myself or somebody else from this wonderful community will try their very best to help you out. If you did like this video, make make sure you hit the like button. That lets YouTube know that it should show this video to other people as well. If you didn't like this video, hit the dislike button twice. And if you do like this kind of content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell on YouTube so that you're notified about my future video. Also, if you've been watching a whole bunch of my other videos and you're interested in the gear that I use, please check out my gear guide. There's a link for that in the description down below as well. Now, it's been nice to see you here today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.